The plan all along was for Nick Ayers, the vice president's chief of staff, to be the heir apparent to step into this role. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump pushed him as the leading candidate. He was right there on the doorstep, and then he walked away and said he didn't want the job.
Which may prove that Nick Ayers is just as smart as everybody really thinks he is. I think one of the things you saw in the meeting yesterday is this is what happens when staff who are responsible for prepping the president for these kinds of meetings just eventually have to just give up. That he's unbriefable. He goes into a meeting, he pulls out some figures about the wall and what percentages and numbers, and as Nancy Pelosi, who I'm normally pretty critical of Nancy Pelosi, but she was really in charge yesterday, and then the whole meeting goes off the rails. Who wants to be the chief of staff or the guy who has to brief in that kind of environment? It's a pointless exercise because the president's going to go in and he's going to say whatever he's going to say, right or wrong, and there's simply no way to stop those disasters. And I think at some point, staff just kind of get demoralized and give up. And I think it's perfectly understandable why somebody like Ayers just said, not a job for me, thank you.
So, John Heilman, just a side note on Jared and Ivanka, who have brought to the table the worst ideas known to man for this presidency. Paul Manafort, Mike Flynn. They were pushing Rudy Giuliani, begging for Rudy to be Secretary of State. We know that from the inside, from Trump himself. And now they're defunct in terms of being able to recruit people because nobody can tell them the truth. At some point, Jared and Ivanka need to realize this. Maybe they won't, but we all see it plain and simple, bared clear, especially given this experience with Nick Ayers, who basically said, yes, yes, no.
Yeah, I mean, look,
there's
no question that Jared and Ivanka are that as you said, Mika, their track record in terms of advice on personnel decisions has not necessarily been stellar, either in terms of the quality of the people they've recommended in some cases, or in terms of their success in terms of reeling people in. But I do wonder about the Nick Ayers thing just in this sense. One of the things that it does coincide, the decision that Nick Ayers made, it does coincide with some of the things that Casey Hunt was talking about, which is about this moment on Friday, which may prove to be a real turning point at least in terms of the reality, the onset of reality sinking in the White House about how significantly imperiled the presidency is on the legal and political fronts, both in the Southern District and in terms of the Mueller probe. And I want to ask Casey this question because, Casey, you pointed out that it does seem like a turning point and that there are signs that on Capitol Hill, Republicans seem to be taking a slightly different posture to the president on a variety of fronts. At the same time, in the last 48 hours, we've heard a lot of Republicans, ranging from Kevin McCarthy to John Thune to Orrin Hatch, all basically saying, when asked about the question of the president's complicity in a felony with respect to Michael Cohen, saying, it's just campaign finance. It's not a big deal. I don't really care about that. It's paperwork. It's bookkeeping. Don't take it too seriously. So they seem to be sticking by him on that front and seem to still be resistant to this onset of reality that others are experiencing. So I'm curious as to how you think those two things sit beside themselves, sit beside each other. That is the notion that they are starting to drift from him, but also at the same time on the central existential issue, still trying to stand by the president.
Well, I think that the question that they're all going to have to grapple with is, what is the degree of difference between the truth of what's going on and the absurdity of their statements? Because, that's kind of what you're seeing a widening of, I think, over time, and that's what they're going to have to grapple with. I would make a distinction, John, between some of the Russia-related collusion questions, obstruction of justice questions, and the questions about, payments around these affairs. Obviously, that was kind of the focus of the Cohen sentencing, but at the same time, I think the shoe that everybody's most nervous about and what they're waiting to see is what happens on the Russia question and just how definitive the evidence is that able to compile. I think that is going to be a critical turning point. Now, that said, Kevin McCarthy was out there yesterday essentially saying that, hey, if we prosecuted every campaign finance violation, there would be a lot of people, lawmakers in Congress who would be in real trouble. that may be a fair statement when you're talking about the fact that, there's all kinds of receipts. People do make errors. Campaigns often have to send back contributions that are in excess. But that's much, much different from willfully committing campaign finance violations, and in this case, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars just a few months before an election in an effort to actually make sure that you are swaying the outcome of the election. And I don't quite understand how those synapses aren't connecting for some of these Republicans who are trying